You're listening to Speaking Of by WFSU Public Media. The Eastern Indigo is the longest native snake in the United States, but since the late 1970s, the serpent has been federally designated as threatened. New efforts are underway to return the Eastern Indigo to Florida. Gina Jordan sits down with WFSU Ecology reporter Diaz de Villegas and Catherine Ricketts with the Nature Conservancy to discuss the return of the Eastern Indigo.
Hi, I'm Gina Jordan, a host here at WFSU Public Media. Today we are speaking of the Eastern Indigo snake. This non-venomous species is listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, and it's making a comeback thanks to efforts by folks at the Nature Conservancy in Florida. Here's audio of then North Florida Program Manager David Prentice in 2020 finding an indigo snake near a gopher tortoise burrow where these snakes spend the winter.
All right, here's something interesting. So, I would say pretty sure that there's an indigo in this burrow or somewhere right around here. Do you see this right here? That is a snake crawl. And because I hear it. There he is. This animal looks as if it is going to shed soon. The eyes are starting to get a little bit milky colored. That's what they do just prior to shedding.
That audio was gathered by Diaz de Villegas of WFSU's Ecology blog, and he joins me now, along with Catherine Ricketts, Preserve Manager with the Nature Conservancy's Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Gina.
Welcome. Catherine, tell us about these snake releases that you all have been undertaking for close to a decade now.
That's right. The first snake release was conducted in 2017, and that was after a number of years of planning and coordination and evaluation by federal and state partners with the hope of reintroducing this species back onto the landscape from which it had been extirpated from North Florida essentially since the early 1980s. So we first released snakes in 2017 and have done so annually since then.
And you feel like your efforts have been working, right?
That's correct. This is an untested process for this particular species, but reintroductions of other endangered animals have occurred across the nation and over the years. So there is a foundation for this type of process, but you never know when you embark on an adventure like this how it's going to turn out. But we've had a lot of resources monitoring our efforts since 2017, and so far we feel like it's moving in the right direction.
Great. And so the 9th release is coming up. And Rob, you've been witness to some of these. What can you tell us about how this works when you are observing this?
Right. So everyone gathers together at the headquarters, and they split off into 3 or 4 teams, I guess, depending on how they want to break people up. And everyone goes to marked gopher tortoise burrows. So I guess the idea is to sort of imprint them upon where these potential winter shelter areas are for them. You know, you have this pillowcase with a snake in it. It's kind of cool because they're really, thin material so they can breathe in there. And you can see their scales. They have these really large scales, large smooth scales, and you can see the texture of them moving along on the pillowcases when you get them. And then you open it up, take it out, read the number out, they catalog it. And most of them will slither right into the hole when you lay them down. Some don't. This is kind of fun to watch. You hold the snake. They're really docile, really smooth, really kind of cool to hold. Just kind of fun to think about. This is an animal that will eat an eastern diamondback rattlesnake, and you're holding it, and it's just the calmest, docile snake. And then you put it, and it goes into the gopher tortoise burrow, and you don't see it again until they survey it later on, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Catherine, tell us what these snakes look like.
These snakes are really amazingly beautiful. They're a glossy black color. Under their chin, and along their lower jaw, they have this kind of rusty orange pattern of scales. Their belly is kind of a light blue-gray, but that light blue-gray really lets this iridescent indigo color shine. You can see it on their backs as well, but it's just a beautiful glossy black snake with this iridescent indigo kind of overtone to it. Mm-hmm. And they have a dark black eye, and It's a striking animal.
And this species is native to the southeastern U.S.
That's correct.
And it's also very long.
Yeah, as far as a native animal, the native snake, it's the longest in North America. They can get up to 8 feet long. And even this past year, we have recaptured an individual that was released 4 or 5 years ago, and this male is already almost 6 feet long.
Wow. Where are we most likely to see an indigo snake?
So, although in North Florida they are more uncommon, with only the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve being the known location for these animals because they were reintroduced, they're also in South Alabama, in Georgia, and in peninsular Florida. They're a reptile, so they're warm-blooded. You're going to find them in places when it's cooler that are sunny. If it's in the summertime, when it's warmer, they're more likely to be found kind of slithering around swamps or wet areas where there's lots of prey items. Anywhere you can find a snake, if it's a place that indigos can be, they'll be out.
So, and you said they might be in swamps in the summer, but like where you are specifically,
Yes.
I mean, you have a really cool geographic feature where they might be found. Talk about steephead ravines.
Sure. So the main reason that Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines became a preserve owned by the Nature Conservancy was to conserve these unique ravine ecosystems, which are really kind of geologic refuges, geologic time scale refuges for plant species that were more commonly associated with the Appalachians. And so during times of ice age, when the climate was different, the coastline of Florida was different, these plant species were spread more across the whole region from the Appalachians to Florida. When the climate changed and became more like it is today, these ravines had formed because basically the sandhills on which ABRP is located today were barrier islands back when the coastline was different, pure sand. So when the rainfall hits it, the water percolates down instead of running over the hill. So it goes directly down like a giant water filter, and it hits the clay layer at the base of this 200-ish foot sandhill, and then seeps out towards the Apalachicola River. So it erodes the hill from the bottom and creates these steep head ravines with these streams that are clear, thermoregulated streams, kind of similar temperature every year. And that climate of the ravines has preserved these species of plants that normally would be today found only in the Appalachians, not in Florida. Mm-hmm. So the snakes utilize those in the summertime because they're filled with prey items. They're cooler than the blazing hot sandhills of Florida. So for us, yes, the snakes definitely use the ravines in the summer months.
I'm trying to picture that. It sounds really cool. Is there any public access at the preserve?
There is. We have a trail called the Garden of Eden Trail. It's located just to the north of Bristol, Florida. So that's about 45 minutes from Tallahassee or so to the west. And you can access that trail year round. It's a very cool trail because you get to experience both the upland sandhills that the Nature Conservancy has worked to restore and the ravine systems. You get to go up and down 2 different ravines on your journey to the Alum Bluff, which is the largest exposed geologic formation in Florida. And it's basically a 135-foot overlook of the Apalachicola River. So it's a really cool hike.
It's like the highest point above a Florida river you're going to get. And it's a view you're not going to see anywhere else in Florida. And it's more elevation, more kind of up and down hiking than any other trail in Florida, too. I mean, Torreya has some as well because it's the same region.
Yes.
It's a little bit of work to get there, but it's fun. I mean, when you get there, it's great.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful.
Just bring water if you're going in the summertime.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So what caused these indigo snakes to become listed as threatened?
Well, like many species that end up on the endangered species list, it was habitat loss. Then for the indigo snake, given that it is such a beautiful, large, kind of charismatic animal, non-venomous, docile, as Rob said, they were pretty popular with the pet trade. And then in particular, in this part of their range, North Florida, South Georgia, Alabama, that experienced the cold temperatures, unlike South Florida, the snakes using those gopher tortoise burrows as winter refuges kind of subjected them to the same issues that gopher tortoises faced with development and gassing of gopher tortoise burrows for businesses to build things. So they kind of became a bycatch issue of destruction of gopher tortoise burrows. And then because they are a large animal, they need a lot of territory. So they're mobile and move around. So roadkill was also another big factor.
Yeah. So the Nature Conservancy is doing these releases of the Eastern Indigo snake every year. What does that look like? First of all, where do you get the snakes that you release?
So they are captive bred. We work with many partners, as I mentioned, and our breeding facility is with the Central Florida Zoo's Orion Center for Indigo Conservation. They breed them in captivity, raise the snakes there for a year. Then they are transferred to Willegas Fish Hatchery, which is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service facility near Jacksonville. And those folks keep the snakes for a second year. So at the end of that second year, around this time, we're getting ready to do the next release in April, the Willegas Fish Hatchery staff will bring our cohort of releasable animals to us, and then we'll set them free into the burrows, as Rob was describing.
How many typically do you release?
So the original plan for the reintroduction project was to have 300 snakes released. That was what the scientists determined would be an adequate number of snakes to develop a self-sustaining population at the preserve, with a goal of 30 snakes released per year. But of course, that depends on the success of the captive breeding. So up until this point, we have not released 30 snakes. It's usually been less.
Okay.
Last year was the first year that, for whatever reason, 2 years prior had been a great captive breeding year. We were able to release 41.
Oh, wow.
You have a plan, but the snakes aren't always going to be amenable to what we've decided that they should do. So
Yes. Yeah. And these are all released on the preserve?
Yes. So we are the second reintroduction site for Eastern Indigos in this part of their range. The Conecuh National Forest in Alabama was the first one that started the program a couple years before we did. So we share snake resources for release.
And so you have your preserve and you're releasing them there, but talk about also you're helping out Torreya State Park with a large amount of land that could also become gopher tortoise and indigo snake habitat.
That's correct. So in addition to having the gopher tortoise burrow density and availability at the preserve, before this release even became a reality, TNC staff over the decades had worked tirelessly to restore the upland sandhill longleaf pine wiregrass community. And they took their methods that they developed to Torreya State Park, which is our neighbor to the north, and worked to restore that habitat too. And I believe we're upwards of helping them restore 4,000 acres of their park to this historic longleaf pine wiregrass community. We've recently extended our survey efforts for the indigo snake into Torreya State Park and started documenting gopher tortoise burrows there, in the hopes that as we keep releasing more snakes, they will start using this habitat if they're not already. They already might be there. We just, it takes person power to get out there and look for them.
Yeah. Why should we be concerned about the well-being of the indigo snakes?
In conservation, when you're trying to work towards restoration and bringing back historic ecosystems that used to be on the landscape, you want all the components, right? It's not just about the longleaf pine or the wiregrass. I mean, those are critical, but you want to have the full complement of species present, and that brings back the ecosystem as close as possible to what it might have been. So when you talk about the indigo snake, it is the apex predator of that landscape. And so you want to have the complete suite of species, not just the plants or certain birds, certain insects, you want it all. And so the indigo snake, being an apex predator, helps keep all the other species in balance. As Rob said, they do eat venomous snakes. So, if you want to make sure your venomous snake population is in balance, your other snake populations are in balance, bring back that apex predator that will help maintain that system the way it used to be.
Yeah. Can we talk a little about the appearance of venomous versus non-venomous snakes? I think this is of use to us.
Sure. So, it can be a little disconcerting coming upon a snake unexpectedly on a trail or on a walk. And a lot of the venomous and non-venomous snakes look the same. Water snakes are notoriously mistaken for cottonmouths because they have the same kind of brownish color. They're maybe not so patterned, not something so obvious that you can tell. But one thing to keep in mind for at least this part of the country, venomous snakes here kind of have a more diamond-shaped head or a wedge-shaped head. And if you happen to get close enough, and even if you're not that close, you can kind of look at their eye and notice that a venomous snake's pupil is more like a cat's eye, that vertical slit type of pupil. Whereas a non-venomous snake will have a pupil that is like our eye, a round pupil. And I feel like when I see a venomous snake in the field, even if I'm not sure if it's cottonmouth or if I'm questioning, is that a water snake or cottonmouth, you just kind of look at that head shape and that eye. You can kind of, it has a little bit of a sinister look to it. And that's because of that vertical pupil. So I don't know. Those are my two key things that I look for.
And what about the head shape for the non-venomous?
They're more of just like a cylinder with a kind of rounded end by the mouth, right? It's kind of like if you were to just draw a snake as a kid, and it's just kind of like a tube.
Right. The shape has to do, I guess, some part of it is the muscles, but also, I guess, the venom glands in there. And if you see, maybe you're close to the preserve and you see a black snake, is it necessarily an indigo snake?
No, most commonly, the black snakes that people will see in their yards, or even if you're near the preserve, it's going to be a black racer. It can be difficult if you've never seen an indigo snake in the wild to know for sure that it's not an indigo. But the main difference is that if you see a long black snake, it's probably a racer if it's a more slender animal. By the time indigo snakes get to be 3 or 4 feet long, they're kind of chunky. They're a full-bodied snake, right? The other main difference is that black racers are a matte black. They don't have a glossy sheen. Mm-hmm. And then also, if people have experienced encounters with black racers, they're called racers for a reason. They slither away with a quickness. Whereas, as Rob said, the indigo is just kind of a docile animal. I think it's just not concerned because it knows it's sort of the king of the world here. Mm-hmm. And so it just hangs out. It's like, oh, well, I'm just here, whatever, just look at me. I'm the emperor of the forest.
Yeah. And the black racers are what we might see in a Tallahassee neighborhood?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Fred.
Yeah, Fred.
We call those Fred in our house. Yeah.
Your neighborhood Fred.
Yes. So what will it take to stop these releases? What kind of numbers do you need to see to be able to stop releasing these indigo snakes?
So that is an ongoing discussion, and actually there was just a meeting held at the end of February with all of the partners that have been involved in this reintroduction program, both in Florida and Alabama, to discuss what success means. And the target goal is still 300 snakes to be released, but it's still in discussion as to when we think that our populations are self-sustaining. We need to certainly document more on-site reproduction by the released snakes, continued documentation of survivorship of both the males and females released, because obviously you're not going to get too much reproduction if you've only got all males or all females. So just continuing to track as best as we can how the snakes are doing, how they're surviving, and certainly more juvenile documentation.
Right. And I don't think we've talked about that, but you have had some evidence of reproduction.
We have. It was really exciting. In the fall of 2023, we were able to find on-site in 2 different locations, which excited us too, because hopefully that's 2 separate clutches of snakes, 2 juveniles. So our field biologist from the OCIC, a woman named Michelle Hoffman, she estimated that when we found the snakes on site, that they were probably about 3 months old, a little less than 2 feet long each one. And as I said, they were found in 2 separate locations. So we don't have documentation yet of their genetic heritage. All the snakes that are released have been profiled genetically, but I don't think we have the results yet to whether or not we can determine the parentage of those 2 juveniles to conclusively say if they're from separate parents. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they were found about 2 miles apart gives us some hope that it might have been 2 separate, events, 2 separate nests.
Yeah. You ever hear an account of someone on the Garden of Eden, like, I saw an indigo snake?
I have not, but it is possible because we have a neighbor to the south of the trail who has found one in his yard. Oh. So it's possible, but I've never heard of anyone specifically seeing one. Now that maybe someone has and they just didn't mention it, but yeah, it's possible.
So the next release is coming up at the end of April.
That's correct.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Any last words you want people to know about this snake and why we should care about its well-being?
I think for anyone who appreciates the natural world and the natural environment, this is just one more thing that we can do to help out our natural communities in Florida. We are so lucky in this state to have really cool natural features, and whether it's the springs or the Everglades or the sandhills of North Florida and the Red Hills, near Tallahassee, it's all unique parts of our heritage in Florida, and the indigo snake is part of that. And so it belongs here just like we do. So it's cool to be able to be part of having that component back in North Florida.
Yeah, and having an apex predator on the landscape, we don't think about this, but in North Florida, we used to have Florida panthers up here. We used to have red wolves that roamed freely, and they play a part in our ecosystems, even if humans have a fear of these animals. But, they provide a certain amount of balance between all the lower predators and the plant consumers and the plant species. So it's cool to have an apex predator out on the landscape.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Preserve Manager Catherine Ricketts with the Nature Conservancy in Florida and Rob Diaz de Villegas of WFSU's Ecology blog. We appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks, Gina.
Just tuning in? You can now hear these conversations on Speaking Of, the podcast version, available on all platforms.